our session today is about feedback, and it's not just the feedback that we normally think of when we think about giving feedback to students, but actually it's the feedback going the other direction. It's the idea of getting feedback from our students to do course refinements, to help us refine our courses to make them focused on whatever the students need at that time. And so during this Lunch and Learn session, we're going to be looking at various methods, including surveys and other tools that we can use to gather information from our students. And that it's going to really help us make that connection, get student buy-in. It's going to make it so that we can give them the best possible learning experience. So we're going to start off with a quick poll. That poll is going to be inside of Zoom. So, I see polls that are in there. Okay, people are completing the polls. Wonderful. Okay, so the poll comes up. It's we've got just 2 questions in our poll. And this is the quick way that you can gather information from your students. So if you're running a Zoom session and you want to do a quick check of a parameter of how things are going, you can do these polls. Now, you do have to plan them in advance. It's not really great to do on the fly. But it is something that you can use to check the temperature of your students, how they're understanding of certain concepts you're teaching. So it looks like we've got 6 out of people who have participated. I wonder if I'm one of the 8. Maybe not. I don't know. Okay, so we're going to take and do a quick look at what we have here. So it looks like, can everybody see this where we have the results? You guys can use the chat. Because I have to keep flipping back and forth, I'm probably going to count on Laura or somebody else to just kind of jump in there when they see something added into the chat. But if you do have any questions, please certainly add them in the chat. Thank you very much, Charlie. All right, so let's look at what we have for our results here. So, so we have 1 person that it scares me. Okay, I completely understand that. And then we have love the idea. Okay, so the idea that things can sometimes scare me because sometimes you're going, wow, I'm not quite sure what they're going to say, but it is one of the situations that it's it's better to have all this information at our fingertips. All right, so let's look at this. So how do you know if your instruction is effective? I know that you are awesome. So that covers the awesome because I look at the student. Okay, so and because I asked the students, wonderful. So I'm going to just do a quick stop here, and I'm going to ask everybody to add a little bit of audio in there. How do you ask your students? So let's do a quick. You can respond either through text or through the verbal. But how do you gather that information when you ask your students? Anybody can jump in.
Just talk to them in class.
Talk to them
and ask them directly.
Okay. All right. And this is in a face-to-face class or in your Zoom session?
I do both. So,
okay.
Yeah. So I'm asking them both. And I'm interested in this because I'm doing a study on student engagement. So
Wonderful.
I would like to implement this because I want to test drive the questions on my class.
All right. Thank you, Charlie. Anybody else have anything about how they gather information from the students? Talking to them, certainly.
I do, Albert. Calvin Izzard speaking.
Calvin?
When I was teaching face-to-face at Georgetown and Dover, I used to do a 3-question instant survey. And it would be question 1, what do you like what I'm doing? Question 2, what do you don't like what I'm doing? Question 3, what should I add to the course? I'd use this as a ticket to leave the room when we did this, and
that gives you.
I do that on my online courses at the halfway point.
Calvin, you are leading me. By the way, I did not pay him in advance for leading me into the next pieces of this, but
I'm sorry.
Calvin is talking very much about the idea of when do we do our gathering of information? And we're going to talk about that in a little bit in here. So thank you very much, Calvin. Anybody, so I'm reading here looks like Kelly Davis's online courses asked for feedback or remaining approaches to open the questions and suggestions. The tone is important. Excellent. Yep, very much. We want to make sure that they feel like they're being listened to. So it's not like we're doing it just for the sake of doing it. We want to make sure that we gather their information and we really take and respond to what they're giving us. And actually, poll is done. Okay, the word. Okay. All right, great. Okay, well, this is awesome. So it looks like, and one of the things that's awesome about this is that you're actually asking the students, because one of the things that we can do is we can gather quite a bit of information from our data inside the system, but it's that asking of the students, it's that direct connection. So let me go back to my presentation here. So we got basically some information. Like I said, I know that you're all awesome. And we look at student scores, and we can look at, because we ask the students, how do we gather that information? So one of the things that we will oftentimes do when we're trying to gather that initial information, or if we want to just see statistically what things are, is we can gather information from the student data. And inside of each one of our D2L courses, we have the grade book, and many of us use the grade book as a gauge of saying, well, gosh, if I was effective, then they would be learning this, they'd be all scoring high. That is certainly true. You can have some students that actually score very high, but sometimes the student that doesn't score very well, there's other things that may be impacting why the student doesn't score high on an exam or a project. So one of the other ways we can do that is actually look at the data that they generate by what they do. And so we have got two areas here. We have a student progress area, and this is right up at the top of your D2L course. When you go and enter your course, you can actually see student progress and student data. And when you go into there, it's going to give a list of all the different students. So here we got Georgia Bond, and then we got, of course, Maggie Simpson. And it's going to give you a number of logins, their attempts, how long they're visiting inside. It tells the visit time. But we can also go in and go into more detail. If we actually click on Maggie, then we'll see this progress summary below. And the progress summary below actually breaks down our course and includes all the different details about the various components. So we can look at the grade items with it. We can look at the content, how long they spend a specific content. So if we're giving them information like instructions on doing a project, and we notice that the instruction screen, they spend a lot of time on that instruction screen, well, that might lead us to maybe they have a question they're trying to figure out from that content screen, what are the directions? Or if they're inside of an assignment, maybe they're inside of an assignment for a long period of time, would that be an opportunity for us to actually ask the question, is there any questions about how to complete the assignment? So we can use this data to actually open some opportunities for conversations, okay? And so we can gather this from each one of our users. Sometimes we can look at the data and kind of compare to users. Like if we see a pattern of a number of students who are really spending a lot of time on that particular content screen, we could say, well, gosh, maybe there is something that is a challenge for that. So that's one way of looking at it with student data. Another way is really digging into that feedback. And, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, is that, feedback, we often think about it as we're giving feedback to our students. And I actually have Hillary's presentation here because she actually spent time talking about how important it is for students to get feedback on their assignments and to get it back quickly and to make sure that the assignment, the feedback is informative. So it's not just a great job, not just thanks, but it's actually got some meaning to it. So one of the things that we can do is really make sure that when we're asking questions, we make sure that our focus is one that is trying to gather that information, meaningful information, okay? And we want to do that in such a way that we're creating a culture that the students want to give feedback. So basically, the key behind this is the fact that we want to make sure that we're focusing on gathering information that is going to be valuable for us because we're going to act on it. And if you want to learn more about really giving student feedback, I bring up Hillary's presentation here so you can go back into it. It was a lunch and learn if you missed it. So we want to build a culture of feedback. And one of the things about a culture of feedback is that it sets the tone for the class. It is, as Calvin was mentioning, he does it right at the beginning. He is trying to take and show the students that, hey, I care about what you think about this class. And also, I want to make sure that I'm acting on what you ask me, or acting on things that you share in the feedback. So we want to make sure that right at the beginning, or as soon as possible, we start asking for feedback. And the interesting part about it is they have been asked feedback, and all of you have been asked feedback pretty much after you do almost everything. So, the idea that you do something online, you get a feedback. You go to McDonald's, you get a feedback survey. So they're constantly, contacted about this feedback. So you could talk about how the idea of that feedback is designed to impact their learning. And so by creating that culture and the fact that you really do care about the feedback and that you're going to make sure that you ask them things that you're really going to act on. So the idea that we want to create that expression right at the beginning of the class. And sometimes you can do that in your announcements. Sometimes you can do it with a fun survey at the beginning. You can do it where you can ask about even some changes about the course right at the beginning, and then make those changes right away if they're small items. Okay. The last part I have in here is explain that you have received the feedback and how you want to help the student. So one of the challenges that sometimes comes up is people go, gosh, I got my course all planned out. I've told the students what my course is. I've given them the schedule. I'm really nervous about making changes to it. Well, if you build this culture of feedback where the idea that if they're going to give you feedback, you're going to act on it, then you can actually explain the fact that, all right, as I mentioned, I value your feedback, so I can start to make some changes here, and the changes are designed to help you in the course based on something that someone has given you back as information. So the idea is that whenever we're doing anything, it's starting off with coming up with the good questions. And I call this hijacking formative assessment. The reason why is so many times we actually have got the surveys that are sent out in the course are sent at the end of the course. Or we might do one survey in the middle of the course. But the challenge is oftentimes those are so infrequent that the students don't feel like, all right, this is just something that needs to be done. I'm not really doing it as part of the change of the class. It's not designed to help me and my learning. And so if we hijack the form of assessment, so the idea of those small activities that we do throughout the learning process, if we add in there additional questions that are designed about that particular project, then the students can start to feel like, oh, wait a second, what I'm saying actually has an impact. And what I have here is I have a screenshot of a survey that is right inside of Desire to Learn. And we do have a survey tool inside of Design to Learn if you haven't played with it. And what you can do is you can generate questions in there that you can release and put anywhere inside the course. And you can put that survey in anywhere in the course. And one of the things that I'm focusing here is the good questions. And so I have a couple that I focused on. So what is the most difficult part of the project one? What is your favorite part of project one? The idea that these are some of what I consider softball questions. They're the ones where we're trying to get their impression on something. But now we start to get into the idea of, okay, least favorite part of the course. Well, where's there a challenge with that? I had a question about how to complete project whatever. And in that one, I actually have it as an example that they can choose how many times they had questions or were confused about that question. Okay, so in that case, there's a multiple choice with that, and I'll show you that in a minute here. But some other ones that get a little bit deeper into it and that have the students think beyond just a basic answer is, if we start to look at it as, if you were going to explain project one assignment to a student in the future, what advice would you give them? So the idea is that it might be study really hard. It might be go back and make sure you read through assignment one. It is going to give you information that you may not have even recognized that the students are feeling after they've done the project. So it's actually helping them and helping you as you prepare the course. And then also the idea is, one of the things that I always find out is, do the students really know the purpose of why they're doing it? Because many times, they're so focused on completing the project that sometimes they lose the trees for the forest, or the forest for the trees. Cannot remember which way that phrase goes. But the idea that they lose focus of what the actual project is in completing the project. So sometimes it's really valuable to make sure that at least they're walking away with what I want them to walk away with in the course. So I'm looking at my time right now. I'm doing pretty good with time. I'm actually going to exit out of the presentation right now and see if anybody's got any quick questions about where we are at this point in gathering information about our learners. Are there any other questions about questions and examples about kind of things that you would ask in your class. And I know Calvin gave a great example at the beginning, but what other questions do you guys have?
Do you tie that to points or some sort of assessment for when they do the survey? Like I do give a mid-semester survey and I don't make it a grade, which I think I should. And I'm more successful in some classes than others, you know, as far as students, it's not mandatory for them to answer it, but I do, and I do a report and then I put up the report and we talk about it, you know, in class or whatever, you know, so students see that maybe they are having the same issue that someone else is having and how we're going to move forward on it. Now, I would tell you, if it was something that was like specific to a student, I wouldn't put that up, of course, but the reporting and for their surveys is fantastic. You know what I mean? So I merge them all together. But let's go back to my other. So how do you, like, even like me, I don't know about, and I'll admit this probably being recorded, but I don't answer all the surveys around here either. So, you know, how do you motivate someone, a student? Do you tie it to a grade or what do you do? What does everyone do to do that?
Well, you can tie it to a grade. The thing is what I try to do is I try to make it so that at the very beginning of the course, they're going to see lots of surveys from this, and every survey has an impact at some point in the course. So by creating that culture at the beginning, it is kind of setting it the idea that, you know what, I really value your opinion, and it's going to very much impact not just maybe this class, but maybe a class in the future. I've done some other things where they can't see the next piece of content until they complete the survey.
Yeah, I don't like that.
It is a strategy. You can also tie it to points, like I said. But the thing I think about is when they're doing for the value of points, are you getting detailed information? And that's also the challenge is if you do it as an adaptive release, that are they just doing it to get through it? You know.
Yeah, not being as honest as you might think, maybe.
That's why I haven't made it mandatory, because I thought, and I mentioned I put up the link, we talk about it, whatever, you know what I mean? Like I said, I'm more successful in some classes than others, you know. But I was just seeing how other people do that to motivate their students. And maybe you're right, Al, I'm not giving enough surveys. I do a mid-semester, then a year end, you know what I mean? So maybe that's it. I'm not kind of getting them, you know, in that mode or whatever, that I do care about what their thoughts are and how to improve the course.
And I think that they see that. I think that the challenge is they're just not used to doing like there's not that many people asking for their opinion, you know, so it is an unusual experience, and they're used to, oh, this course we have a mid-semester survey and we have an end of semester, you know, so it's like you know, when they have to do the end of semester surveys for the courses to complete them, and the number of times that they have to get nagged about the idea of completing that, it's because they go and think, all right, this is just something I have to do. It has no impact on me, you know? And so sometimes by doing it as earlier in the course, one of the things that it does do is says, well, wait a second, you know what, this actually, and what I try to do is I try to make it so that there's something in the initial surveys that I can change in the class. So that, like, I did a survey with my one class saying, this class runs over Halloween. Do you want this to be a zombie class? And so in that case, I can start to I added zombies and Halloween stuff. So I started adding graphics in there that were zombie and Halloween related and stuff like that. So it was a soft giveaway on my part. You know, I wasn't changing their grade point average or anything like that. But what it did is they did see the fact that, oh, wait a second, I'm going to listen to this stuff that they say.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. Sometimes they could. Yeah, so they're you know, tickets, you know, you can use it as exit tickets in the class. You can use them as entry tickets in the class. So the first thing that they do when they enter the class is to actually complete a survey. And you can use those gathering information on what they're taking away from their outside of learning. So the idea that I'm gathering stuff before I actually start the instruction, and it's a check, you know, it's a check for understanding. And we can do those formally and informally. And many times what it'll do is it'll inform you of, gosh, I got to make sure I cover this because a lot of people miss this, you know? So, you know, those kinds of things where you're given those kind of feedback that is really touching base with them.
And Al, one of the things that we had talked about that I just wanted to underline for you that you mentioned it, is that it's very important, I think, if you want students or individuals to participate in the surveys, again, make sure that they feel heard. And be very strategic in your question choice, because don't ask questions that you don't feel like you can act on either. Make sure that they're things that are actionable that if students, and it can be validating things that you've done. Yep, I have to keep this in the next iteration of this course because they love it and it's valuable and they found value in it. But also places where you think, yeah, I'm open to change. I think I can make some changes here. I'm just not sure what would help them the best. And then we talked about if you can make any small changes in the live course, which, maybe big ones have to wait until the next one. But if there are any things like adding that zombie picture, right, that you can add to make sure students feel heard, you're also going to increase the level of community within your class too. And I think as you're developing that community, people will contribute more often as well. Thanks for letting me chime in, Al, because I just remembered our conversation.
That's good thought, Laura. That's a great thought. I wanted to quickly ask you, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to take away time, but like week 2 or 3, is that a good time to introduce a survey?
I do it in the first day. So I do a survey
the very first day. Okay.
And literally I do it every time they have a major activity that they do. So I said it was hijacking the formative assessment. So every time they're doing something where they're giving part of themselves. So, they're sharing, they're putting in their assignment, they're turning in something. I want to find out, was this a challenge for you? Was this something that were the instructions clear?
I like that.
And the sooner I can do that, and the more frequent I can do that, it becomes a pattern for them. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to establish a pattern so that it's not just something that I'm doing, it's actually part of my learning process. And Laura, one of the things I'm going to mention some things that Laura and I talked about too, was the idea that, that many times we want to make sure that they understand they're being heard. So if there's something comes up that a lot of students have expressed a concern about, you can actually in your announcement say, hey, this has come up in a couple conversations in your feedback from your survey. So the idea, remember how I was saying about explaining it. So you really want to drive home this point of making sure that you understand what it was and what led to that decision. So if you're saying, hey, I got the survey back from everybody, thank you very much for your feedback. One of the things that came up from the surveys was ... But yeah, I mean, the idea of making it so that this is not an afterthought. You want to make it so they realize that this is something actually you're doing for the class. And the fact is sometimes you have to say, as Laura was saying, sometimes you have to say, I can't do anything about it with this time in the course, but this is very much going to help the next class. Now you do have to worry about the concern of some students going, well, gosh, I'm just making it better for everybody else. This class for me, I'm going to suffer through this class. Well,
I still see that improving student engagement though. Even though it might not change it right then, they feel like they have some input in the whole process anyway. That's still a rewarding experience, for them.
Right. And one of the things that I'm always trying to do with my class is to try to tell them that, what they're doing in the class is not just important because they're in my class. I want them to realize that whenever you complete any survey, they're gathering that data so they can make the best changes. So if McDonald's is asking you surveys about their service, it's because they want to find out about their service. And so this is your opportunity to have a voice where you ordinarily would not have a voice. And go ahead.
Oh, and Al, I was just going to interject too. The next part of your presentation, I think might be something that everybody's really interested in as well, because if you're concerned about survey fatigue, I think your next idea helps to avoid some of that survey fatigue if you wanted to talk about your focus groups.
Yes, and once again, I did not pay her for this perfect lead-in. But the idea that, like you said, the students do get these surveys and they get them in every place in their life, and then adding them in class is just another thing in class. But what you can do is actually use groups. And so, you can talk to them about focus groups and what the purpose of a focus group is, but you can create groups inside of D2L, break them off into small segments, and then have them actually give them pointed questions for that particular group to answer. And that way, it's not just one person going and completing a survey. It's the idea that they actually get to talk through and formulate more in-depth ideas on something rather than just the quick responses. So you can ask for more detailed explanations from a focus group than you can from just a general survey. One of the things that we think about surveys is we want to keep them short. because if you have a 30-page survey, you're not going to get the results that you want. But inside of a focus group, you can actually give them some big concepts to tackle, and they can tackle them because it's not just one person doing it, it's actually several people. So, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about groups. I actually did a lunch and learn about groups last year, fall last year, whatever, spring. I did one on using groups, and there was a ton of things that you can use groups for, and I'd be happy to talk to anyone who wants to learn about using the group feature and all the different things you can do with groups. So, so some of the things that we can do when we talk about with using feedback is that we want to make sure the students realize that we're going to use their feedback. It's not just for the sake of doing it because I want to look good on my evaluations. You want to actually do that. So you actually want to show them that whatever you're doing is their voice actually matters. So the idea of promoting that culture of feedback right from the beginning and showing them how it impacts. You also want to make sure that, as Laura was saying, you want to make sure that you ask the questions that you're willing to hear the answer. Because sometimes you might ask a question and go, oh gosh, I didn't really realize that I bombed the lesson that bad, or more, in my case, sometimes, wow, I really experimented with that and that did not go over well. So, the idea that, I want to make sure that if I'm going to ask them the question, I have to be ready to answer, to get their feedback and also to act upon it, giving them some sort of validation of the fact that they've been heard. Okay. And then the idea, does that feedback impact the current course or a future course? So if you ask a question that is something that's bigger or would possibly change the trajectory of your course, then you can say that I need to include this in a future class, and that I will actually give this class credit. So one of the things you can say is, in my last class, they actually talked about this particular assignment, and that's why it is this way. And that way the students actually feel like, wait a second, you know what? I have actually got a voice beyond just the class that I'm in. And then also that last part of making it transparent, okay, that you're responding to their needs. You basically want their feedback in order to create change. But the idea of the fact that, the feedback also can create this culture where, sometimes we're taking risks and we are going to try things in our class, and we want your feedback on how it works, because there may be something you might experiment with your class with. And you know what? It's that first time you're trying it. So if anybody's been through the CDI, the Course Design Institute, you did a lot of work in there. And sometimes what you've done, you don't know if it exactly worked out. So sometimes you have to go back and you go, I think that, I want to gather information about whether or not this worked or not. So you really want to take and delve into that, making sure that you can get the information you need to determine whether or not you need to make changes to it. Okay, so those are any times you're making any of those big changes. And like I said, you are now part of my student group, because there's many students where I hear this, Mr. Unrath, you're not sharing anything. So thank you for that. So here's the question I was on. So basically, the idea of promoting the culture of feedback, asking questions, only the ones that like you said, don't ask a question that you don't want to hear the answer to. The idea of making it so that they feel like when they're giving you feedback, it's valuable. It's not just that you're giving it lip service. So in my wrap up, I focused on 4 main things today. And it was the idea of using Zoom and simple surveys. There's actually, like I said, Laura shared Hillary's presentation on surveys, which was, about giving student feedback, which was really, really valuable. And then also Laura did a presentation actually on the survey tool. So basically you can go back and watch that, and she did an excellent job with explaining about how the survey tool works inside of D2L. I know I use Google surveys a lot because they're fast to do. Looking at those simple, quick surveys, gathering information, that those check-in, check-out tickets, things like that. Looking at the student data, there's a lot of information, and I know there's going to be a presentation coming down the pike on using student data, all the different things you can do with inside D2L. D2L gathers a lot of information on the activity of our students, and it can be done in such a way that you can do it for really helping you understand where your students are going in the course. And then really hijacking that formative evaluation, really doing the surveys more frequently, right when they're hot with their thoughts. So the idea that I just turned something in, I spent a lot of time with this. All right, what are your thoughts on, not just how was the thoughts on the assignment, but more on, what did your thoughts change after doing this assignment? What would you change in the future if you just did it? Or the other one I always like is, how will this change you by doing this assignment? So the idea that we're gathering information from them about the possibilities of, are we really meeting the outcome of our course? If our goal was to change their attitude towards something, well, did this project actually help to contribute to that? So you can ask that kind of survey question. And then the idea of using focus groups. There, we haven't even tapped into half the capacity of what we can do with the group feature and with focus groups inside of our class. And it's right inside of D12. It's all captured from us. We can use it from semester to semester, which is the other thing that's neat about this is, as we build these things, it's not just a one and done. When you copy your course for the next semester, you've now all got all these pieces there that you can just roll out and refine for each new semester. I am very happy to work with you. This is a personal joy of mine. Finding out what makes students excited about learning is really important to me, because I want them to do this for the rest of their lives. And if I can hit that spark now, we can carry it forward later. So thank you very much, everybody.